Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
All right. Welcome everyone to the Wednesday, March 20th meeting of the Sioux Falls Parks and Recreation Board. We will begin as always with a roll call and determination of quorum, please.
Lori Lindquist.
Present.
Jim Stavanger.
Here.
Ann Noctigal.
Here.
Mark Steinborn.
Here.
Todd Sundley. Patty Abdullah. Mike Bigman.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
All right, thank you. And you have received the minutes from the February 20th meeting, and those were distributed. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes?
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote, please, Rita.
Lindquist.
Yes.
Stavanger.
Yes.
Noctigal.
Yes.
Steinborn.
Yes.
Sundley. Abdullah. Bigman.
Yes.
Okay. Again, welcome to all of you today. This is the time in which we do public input, and so if you are here though for a particular item on the agenda, we would ask that you wait and speak at that time. One thing for the to assist Rita out, there is a sign-in sheet today, and so if you have not yet signed in, we would appreciate that so that we can get your name and correct spelling in our minutes. There's also one additional public info packet back there, so if you're in need of that, Rita can get that to you. So with that said, I would first ask each of you to, who are guests, to introduce yourself, and if you are here for a particular item on the agenda, let us know what that is, and if you're here for public input, this would be your opportunity for that. We can start over. We can start there. Yeah. Oh, no, well, go ahead.
Mike Patton,
Yeah.
Parks and Rec.
Tori Meadable, Parks and Rec.
Kathy Bradford from Public Input.
Go ahead, if you want to, you may at this time. Sure. We want to go ahead? All right, we'll finish the intros first. All right.
Sky Smothers, Parks and Rec.
Okay.
Dan Bragan, Green Bear, Ski Valley.
Good afternoon, Kevin Keyser, Regional Supervisor for Game Fish and Parks at the Regional Office Outdoor Campus.
Audrey Willard, Butterfly House and Aquarium CEO, here for the discussion of Sertoma Park lease.
Lindsay Marwell, Butterfly House and Aquarium Development Director.
Harriet Cattenberg, Falls Park Farmers Market.
Vicki Vanwer, Falls Park Farmers Market.
Shelby Maris, Parks and Recreation.
Nancy Halverson, Levitt for the Falls, for that winemaking.
Okay, thank you all. And Kathy, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody. I'm kind of short. Okay. I'm calling to ask a special favor. I'm coming to ask a special favor. I tried calling, but I wasn't able to get anybody. So a special favor. I brought this up about 6 years ago, and it turned out I was going on about it all wrong. So now I know to come to the park board first, okay? So what I've noticed is that when you have an event in the park, and then there's different groups that sell things as part of this event, we have to pay a fee to the city as well as what we pay to the sponsor of the event to be a part of that event. And I don't think you realize that that's sometimes a hardship. So what I'm coming to suggest is that the fee could be dropped for nonprofits, and that as a special favor to nonprofits. And like one reason I'm asking this is that nonprofits do a lot of good for our city, and it used to be in the old days, probably before your time, that the city used to give a lot of money to nonprofits. And I remember there were a few years there, tight budgets and stuff, that they dropped that, and very few nonprofits get help from the city anymore. But still, there should be ways that we can be generous and helpful to nonprofits in our city, and this would be one way that we could. And the particular nonprofit that I'm involved in is our church mission committee. We sell flags at the Festival of Cultures, and we used to sell flags at the German Fest too, but it got too expensive. So because we have to pay $50 to the city, and we also have to pay a certain amount to the Festival of Culture, to the Festival of Cultures for that one. And well, the way Festival of Cultures does it, they just charge like the $100, and that that includes our fee to the city, which they send on to the city for that event. And then the way German Fest does it is we pay a fee to German Fest, and we get our $50 fee to the city, and we pay a commission of what we sell to German Fest. So it just got too expensive then we also had to buy the flags that we sell, and so we weren't making any money on all the work that we did. So we dropped that one. But we'd love to sell there again, but it's just too expensive. So there may be other groups that are not participating that we don't even know about, and you would have no way of knowing because they're just not participating. And so I think it would invite more participation, and it would be nice for these festivals, these events, to not have to charge, not have to have the cost of participating be so much. So that's something the city could do. And it just seemed like the city doesn't seem like it's that broke that we couldn't do that. So I looked up several events to see how much different that would make. And I noticed at Festival of Cultures last year, I looked at who the vendors were. There are only 2 nonprofits, ours and one other. There are other groups there. There were little groups that were not selling anything. And of course, there's no charge and you don't need a city permit for those. So of the groups that were selling anything, they were all food vendors and I don't know who all. There's some companies that come and they sell clothes from Ecuador and stuff like that are profit-making kind of ventures. But for nonprofits, there were like just 2 of us. So it wouldn't be a big deal for the city. So also I looked at the German Fest, and there were only 2 or 3. It would be 3 if the Dachshund Rescue has to pay to participate. I don't know if they do. But there really weren't many there either. There would have been one more if we were there, but we weren't. And then I looked at Cinco de Mayo, and I just saw 3 nonprofits selling things there. So it's not like it's a huge thing that I'm asking, but I think it might be something that it's time for the city to be able to consider dropping the fees for nonprofits. So there's also, of course, the events themselves. A lot of them are nonprofit organizations, and they have to pay the fee to use the space, to use the parks and that kind of thing, and for the setup and the cost of moving picnic tables around and all that. But I'm not talking about that part. I'm just talking about the vendor fees, okay? I mean, the other part could be talked about another time. And some of these that do festivals are functions of the city, like the Multicultural Center, which runs Festival of Cultures. That is a function of the city, the Multicultural Center. Also, the German Fest is really the sister cities, and that's a function of the city too. So these are, those 2 at least are city events. But anyway, I just want to suggest that. And so I called around to some other cities, which I did 6 years ago when I did this too, and to let you, so you could know that our fees are a little out of line compared to a lot of other cities. I didn't call. I mean, there are lots more cities I could have called, but I'll give you the ones I did talk to. So you'll see I have Sioux Falls at the top with a $50 fee for both profits, first column, and the next column is nonprofit. And then in most of the cities, you'll see that there's no fee at all for the vendor to sell in the parks. It's just if there's an event, the sponsor has to pay, and then they'll charge whatever they want to the vendors. And so we as vendors would just pay it to the sponsor, and that helps them cover their expenses, both to the city and whatever other expenses they have. So that's how it is in most towns. And then there are some towns you see, like Lincoln, Nebraska has $20 fee, Omaha has $20 for either nonprofit or profit making. Anyway, most of them have gotten to be the same. When I called 6 years ago, some of them were lower for, wait a minute. One of them has a little more for the other. Oh yeah, in Minneapolis, you'll see it's lower for the nonprofits. And then, like, we go over to Worthington and we don't have any fee at all, not even sales tax, so that's really nice for nonprofits. So anyway, I'll just leave that suggestion with you if you would consider that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Kathy, thank you for coming
Question?
and for your
Yeah.
comments and
Yeah.
bringing it to our attention.
And thank you folks for serving on the park board. I know it takes a lot of your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kathy.
All right, any additional public comment? I guess not. So we'll move on to the report of the standing committees, marketing and public needs. All of the items that we discussed are on the agenda. There was one additional item that we did discuss, and that was the 100th anniversary celebration of the municipal band and the exhibit that will be opening at the Siouxland Heritage Museum in April. So park system planning and development, all items are on the agenda, and again, we talked about the anniversary celebration of the municipal band. Partnerships and recreation.
We did not meet.
Okay. All right. No unfinished business, so we will move on to the new business agenda items, the first being the farmer's market agreement. Jackie?
So you should all have this in your packet, the agreement for the farmer's market. So I'm here to talk through the agreement and recommend approval. So this agreement is between the Downtown Farmers Market Incorporated and the City of Sioux Falls. This agreement expired at the end of last year, so this would be a new agreement, but very similar to what was previously agreed upon. Just to walk through some of the sections, Section 1 remains the same with priority use of the open air shelter and vending stalls located at North Falls Park Drive. Saturdays from 8 to 1 from May 1st through October 31st of each contract year. We did add one exclusion in the contract going forward for this term, and that would be for the year 2020 when Independence Day falls on a Saturday, that the farmers market would work mutually with the City of Sioux Falls to determine a new date, time, location if possible, so that we can work through both events, have both the farmers market still be well attended as well as the Independence Day celebration. We added that restriction or that term into this agreement as it relates to safety and usability of both the park and the farmers market for that weekend. In terms of Section 2, responsibilities remain the same. Farmers market will set up and remove the barricades as well as empty trash receptacles. The city, however, does provide the trash receptacles as well as the barricades. The area must be clean and vacated by 2 p.m. on those Saturdays. Looking at Section 5, those would be the concession fees that are part of this agreement. Each vendor during the year of 2019 will be required to pay a concession fee of $200. This is consistent with 2018. In 2020, it would go up $25 to $225, and then another $25 in 2021 up to $250. So increasing $25 over the next 3 years. Section 8 would be the term of the agreement. So this agreement will begin April 1st, 2019, as they hope to open in May, pending weather, and would terminate December 31st of 2021. There is an exhibit at the back of the agreement that does show the open air shelter at Falls Park, where the farmers market is currently held and is planning to remain. And with that, I do have Harriet and Nikki here with me from the Downtown Farmers Market Incorporated to help answer any questions, provide any additional information you guys would like to know about the farmers market. And with that, we do recommend approval of this usage agreement.
Any questions? Do you have any comments you'd like to make regarding the agreement?
We appreciate the facility, it works really well.
All right, any additional questions?
Have you heard any pushback from the vendors with the increases for the rate?
That's my farmer, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Okay, what was the question?
Have you heard any pushback from the vendors with the increase in rates?
It gets harder and harder, I think, to recruit new vendors because they don't realize what is possible and what they can, you know, how they can build their business there. So it gets harder and harder, and we keep passing it, we try to keep passing it on to the vendors because, of course, we need the marketing budget. We don't want to, we froze it last year, but we passed it on again this year because we don't want to take down on our, lower our marketing budget. That wouldn't make any sense either, so.
Now, how many vendors are you up to?
I think we lost a couple this year, so I think it's 20 or 21 so far. There's,
I'm just curious as to the business cycle. Is there part of the summer where business is stronger versus less, or is it pretty even?
no, it starts out pretty good in May, but it depends on the weather. So Nikki does pizzas, I do plant sales, and then organic vegetables and cut flowers. So the first the May's really weather dependent because especially plant sales, they'll just go uptown. If it's ready to plant their garden on Wednesday, they go uptown. June is really hard because our gardens aren't producing and they don't need plants or anything anymore. So June's kind of hard. And then July and August, boom, are really, really good, and it's packed. We really don't have enough room. We worry about picnic tables and bikes and strollers and all that kind of stuff. Parking's an issue. And then as soon as school starts, it just, whoosh. And so we have to really focus our marketing on trying to keep people coming, because by that time, all your good storage vegetables, all your root crops, your squashes, everything's abundant. But when they go back to school, I don't know if it's sports is what we assume. We're assuming McDonald's, and so if business goes high, up goes once they go back to school. So, and October can, again, really weather related. It can just really be flat.
So are there some vendors with product that you would like to have but don't have? Maybe not a vendor, but product?
We're always looking for something different. I think we have.
I wasn't aware of the pizzas, but that doesn't strike me as farmer's market. But
Well, it has
You
to
gotta eat.
Yeah.
Well, I know.
When you're shopping.
and it has to be local, see, so she makes them all right there on site. And I think this looks like Bredigo is gonna come this year, so that's an advantage. We're gonna need honey again, because we lost both honey vendors. Kind of just goes up and down, and it's hard to find a lot of local products. That's the part. In our rules, we say within 100 miles, and I think that really makes us unique and really makes us, I mean, you don't have oranges, bananas, et cetera, but it limits what we can do too. So, and we don't want to get too much into the craft world, and so we kind of just really try to stick with our rules. The 100 miles has to be locally produced, and not too many vegetables. I think we have 10 or 12 vegetable vendors, so we've really holding that number there until we get the clientele to go with. So you kind of need to build your clientele and your vendor numbers. You have to kind of do it carefully. So it's been good. The structure has really, really, really helped. Developing the field as parking has really helped. I mean, the bathroom's wonderful, you know, the little playground, all those things. We're going to hire, we did it a couple weeks, we hired traffic control and try to get people to move out the back, go down that piece that we built going, or you helped us build going down into the field, and then get them to go out around the other way. Otherwise, they come back up, and then you have such a cluster. So we're going to try to get them trained to go out the other way. So.
And we're hoping to partner, if there's any events going on across the street at the Falls Park, to kind of work together for that traffic control too, so that we can kind of spread that out.
So.
Thank you.
Thanks, good information, appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, with that being said, is there a motion to approve the farmer's market agreement?
So moved. Second?
Okay, roll call vote, please, Rita?
Lindquist,
Yes.
Cavender,
Yes.
Knockteville,
Yes.
Steinmore,
Yes.
Seigerman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, Jackie, the Lloyd Company Levitt Lawn naming application.
So I'm here to talk to you about another naming application for the Levitt Shell Sioux Falls. This one is in regard to the Levitt lawn. Within your packets, you received the agreement between Lloyd Properties and the Levitt Shell Sioux Falls. What is being passed around the table right now is the actual naming application, and this would be what you would be approving today. as part of our conversation. But I will talk through both high-level detail just so you can understand what's in front of you. So the document that just got passed around again was the application, and this is the request from Lloyd and Levitt Shell Sioux Falls to the city to rename park properties. So renaming the lawn at the Levitt, the Lloyd property, or the Lloyd lawn at the Levitt Shell. So throughout that application, a lot of it is just internal city code information, but the back page does list some additional information to show that it has gone through the proper channels within the city for approval. And then with this application to name the lawn at the Levitt Shell, the Lloyd lawn, there is a signage agreement, so that is in your package as well, and that walks through more of the terms and conditions that Lloyd and the Levitt have agreed upon. Within that, this would be a 5-year term for $50,000, $10,000 installments beginning this June as part of the signage agreement. This would also include adding the Lloyd logo to the concrete slab that has currently been poured for sound and lighting equipment. So there's some pictures in the back of the signage agreement that show you the concrete pad, where it's located through some of the concept maps, as well as what it looks like currently today as poured concrete. So what they'd be looking at is adding their Lloyd logo to that concrete pad that's already poured. So not installing anything different from a concrete perspective. The pad that you're looking at is 8 by 16. The Lloyd recommended logo, or what they're proposing, what they've talked through with Nancy and the Levitt, would be their logo would be 7.5 by 10. So actually a little bit smaller than what the pad currently is poured at. So again, the agreement would begin May 1st and run through 5 concert seasons. So it would terminate September of 2024. They're looking at adding their Lloyd logo onto that concrete pad near the north of the stage as part of their agreement for $50,000 over the 5 years. And with that, I would just recommend approving, or a motion to recommend approving the application to name the lawn at the Levitt, the Lloyd lawn at Levitt Shell. With that too, I'm not aware of any known oppositions or disadvantages with having Lloyd being the naming sponsor for the lawn. And I do have Nancy with me from Levitt as well to help answer any questions.
So the signage agreement, that's just between the Levitt and Lloyd company?
Correct.
So they're not.
Yep. So what you would be approving is naming the lawn, yep. Naming park property.
Does the equipment go on top of that concrete slab then? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so that's the concrete slab that the sound and lighting technicians would be using. So during a concert, it'll be covered up for the most part. What they talked about doing is potentially putting a tent over the top of it with the Lloyd logo on the top of the tent, since the logo would be covered up on the ground. If you happen to be flying over during a concert, you would still see the logo via the tent. Yep.
Any questions for Jackie or for Nancy? We have Nancy here too.
This is different than the original proposal, right? It's smaller.
Yes, the original thought was to add a secondary cement piece, but suddenly it was a midnight wake up. Why are we adding more? Right. It's already there. It's a way to use what's already on the lawn.
Yeah.
And the signage agreement has already has gone through the National Levitt
Yes.
Association too.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, this will have to go on from us. So today we are looking for a motion to recommend approval of the Lloyd Company Levitt Lawn naming application. Is there a motion?
Move to
Recommend approval.
recommend approval of the motion.
All right. Roll call vote, please, Rita.
Lindquist,
Yes.
Stavinger,
Yes?
Noctigal,
Yes.
Steinborn,
Yes.
Hagerman.
Yes.
Great. Thanks Nancy. All right. Next item is the Sertoma Park lease, and that will be presented by Mike Patton.
Hello. So we talked about this item in committees. I believe most of you were here, maybe not, Ann. This is an update to the existing lease, sublease for Sertoma Park. A little background on it. Last summer, The board approved an updated master plan for the park due to the desire to do some development from all the different groups within. The current lease sublease ends on January 10th of 2022, but with the desire to make some changes within the park, the catalyst is to update this lease now. So the lease was in your packet, but I'll go over some of the major points and changes to the lease sublease. So generally it's pretty much the same, but there are a few differences. So first of all, it's been reviewed by all parties, the state, the Butterfly House Aquarium, and the city. It updates the lease sublease to current standards like insurance and employees discrimination, etc. The new termination date will be June 30th of 2045, and that coincides with the existing lease with the state. So at that point, we'll be looking at a new lease for both. The area that the Butterfly House Aquarium subleases will be increased a little bit to accommodate their additions to their facility. There's some language we've added to the lease sublease that states generally at least 1 year prior to the termination of the lease, the parties will get together and discuss a new lease. So I'm sure Karen would state that we can't bind future city councils, but in good faith, we'll try and work going forward when this lease is up. There will be no rental payments. It's $1 total. The one thing that wasn't in the previous lease is there was no access guaranteed on the park road. So it was just kind of an island out there. We've added some language that would guarantee access on the existing Sertoma Park Road for the Butterfly House Aquarium. Any improvements have to be consistent with the master plan. And then the state will also have to approve, state and city will have to approve any changes to the master plan. So the city is not obligated to pay for any of the improvements that the Butterfly House Aquarium or the state are going to do. And the Butterfly House Aquarium is solely responsible to pay for all their improvements, including any additional parking that's required per the master plan. On that note, the state and the city must approve all construction projects. So basically anything that the Butterfly House or the aquarium would like to do, we would have approval of prior to it. They've agreed to coordinate with everybody on the planning, design, and construction of any improvements. And then any improvements also have to be in line with any applicable building codes or regulations. The maintenance responsibilities stay the same. We did include some language as far as termination of the lease, and this has gone back and forth a little bit, but was ultimately determined was upon termination of the lease, the Butterfly House Aquarium will have to deliver the building itself to the city in reasonable condition. So what reasonable means, I don't know, but in good repair. And then also they have the right to remove any furniture, fixtures, equipment, aquarium tanks, whatever that might be. Anything really that's not bolted down or a permanent piece of the facility, they have the right to remove prior to termination. The use has to remain the same, so it has to be for recreational, educational purposes, and no subleasing will be allowed. So the schedule going forward is we're looking for the board's recommendation of approval today, and then it'll go before City Council here in April. Staff supports the changes, and Audrey Willard with the Butterfly House Aquarium and Emmett Kieser with the state is here, and we can address any questions you might have.
Any questions? Audrey, would you like to just take a few minutes and update us on your expansion plans for out there?
Hello, everybody. Yes, this has shifted gears pretty quickly, so thank you to Don and your team for getting this through. We are at a point now where we have $3.525 million pledged towards our project, so we're wanting to keep things moving along so that we hopefully can begin some form of construction this summer on our administrative space, and then moving into aquarium construction in 2020. And the reason we needed to get the lease updated for that longer timeline was so that as we were meeting with donors, they had that assurance that we would be around for a while. And another key piece that Mike didn't mention is the conveyance of the building from our organization to the city at the end of the lease was also removed, so we could assure our donors that the building would remain an asset of our organization. And that was something that our donors were really hoping to see. And so we've gotten everything figured out. We feel really good about the master plan and the future of Sertoma Park. I think we're all excited to see what's next.
Did you have any water in the building with the flooding?
We did not. Us and the outdoor campus are just little islands in the park, so we're all good. And of course, we'll take that into account as we develop our construction plans to make sure that we don't have any issues going forward.
Any other questions for Audrey?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there are no other questions, is there a motion to recommend approval of the Sertoma Park lease?
So moved. Second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Lindquist,
Yes.
Stavanger,
Yes.
Noctigal,
Yes.
Steinborn,
Yes.
Hageman.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. And again, Mike, for the barely standing sculpture placement.
Thank you. Barely Standing is a 6-foot-tall bear on Phillips Avenue made of cutlery, stainless steel cutlery. An application was put in by Dan Greider at Great Bear Rec to move the bear sculpture out to Great Bear. The proposed location is shown on the map that's in your packet. It was the people's choice last year, so it's city-owned art. It has been evaluated by RLA, the city's art conservator, and we do have the artist release waiver signed. And the installation or maintenance of the bear going forward will be covered under the city's annual art budget. We were before the Visual Arts Commission yesterday. They voted unanimously to place the bear at the bear. And staff recommends approval. Dan Greider is also here and can answer any questions you might have.
Okay.
I got a question for Dan. Is the bear gonna be on a ski board or anything like that, or is he just gonna be on the block here?
I believe he's going to be on a rock. Some quartzite is what we're looking at. But no, we want to put him on a pedestal, kind of get him up off the ground a little bit. But it'll be a real neat addition to the park. Iconic photo op, you know. So it'll be pretty cool.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. If not, is there a motion to recommend approval of the barely standing sculpture placement?
Move to approve.
Second that.
Okay, roll call vote.
Lindquist,
Yes.
Stavanger,
Yes.
Noctigal,
Yes.
Steinborn,
Yes.
Hageman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Tori will take us through the NSP purchase agreements for the Falls Park substation and then for the Morel substation.
Thanks, Lori. The two purchase agreements are in your packet for NSP. They're quite lengthy. They mirror each other, so the first one was drafted with the Falls substation, and then we did the same thing with the Morel substation. Instead of walking through that lengthy agreement, I figure I'd just highlight the bullets, and I've got a short presentation to kind of walk you through it. The bullets were part of your packet as well, so if you want to follow along. So the first one is the Falls substation. If you can look at the exhibit there, the lots in yellow are basically the land that was used for the Falls substation, and that's the piece that that purchase agreement deals with. As you can see, it goes right along Weber Avenue. To the left of the larger parcel, there's a railroad track that cuts that piece off with the Falls Overlook Cafe parking lot. The Falls Overlook is just to the left and down towards the bottom of the exhibit. All in all, that substation is about 4 acres of land within Falls Park. The second substation is the Morel substation. If you go just to the north, following the greenway along the Big Sioux in Falls Park, that's where you'll find the Morel substation. On the exhibit, you'll see to the right of the page is some of Morel's. And then to the left, if you see the line that kind of goes along with the property, that's the bike trail. So the bike trail does go through there. It goes up to the spillway just to the north of this property. The properties around the yellow piece are all owned by the city. So getting this piece would give the city control over all the greenway in that stretch along the Big Sioux River. So those two properties are what the purchase agreement is about. If you can hit the next one. As a part of this purchase agreement, the city would then grant easements for the utilities that NSP will have that will remain in service after the land transfer. So the piece in orange that goes through Falls Park, that's the underground easement that we would grant. There's basically an underground utility that goes through the site, goes down by the Falls Overlook Cafe, under the bridge, the pedestrian bridge, and then through Falls Park and eventually get to Phillips Avenue. The yellow piece is the overhead easement that we would grant, and those are the overhead power lines that basically run alongside Weber Avenue, go up to the north, and eventually go through the Morel property as well. If you can hit the next one. So the Morel site, the easement that we would grant would basically cover the entire property. Basically, all they have as far as utilities that will remain there are the overhead power, and then a upgraded tower that they put in just to the power line that's lowest on the line there. As it sits right now, the two properties, NSP has removed all of their structures and facilities that they have there. They moved them to a new substation when they did their large main upgrade to the city of Sioux Falls power grid. That new substation was built just to the east of the Falls Park in the former stockyards area. So they do have all of their facilities gone. So we'd take the property as is, as it sits today. Couple other things that I'd like to just point out as far as the agreement, if you can hit the next one. The other considerations we have is we'd be granting an environmental indemnification to NSP for both of the properties. That was one of the terms that they put when we first started negotiations with the purchases. Because of that, we went and did our due diligence and did a phase 1 environmental assessment on both properties. We found no significant issues. There were 3 spills on the Falls substation site. All of those spills were reported to the DNR, cleaned up, and the cases were closed on all 3 of them. We don't have any concerns as far as environmental on either of the properties. One of the other things that we're looking at is reversionary rights. I mentioned in the Falls substation that there was a railroad track that was adjacent to that property. When we were doing our due diligence as far as title search on the properties, we saw that NSP had reversionary rights on that joint industrial track. NSP has granted to give those, or has agreed to grant the city those reversionary rights, which is important to us. If that track ever did become abandoned and was deemed excess property for the railroad, the land would revert back to the city of Sioux Falls, and we think that would be a big deal. So they have agreed to grant us those reversionary rights. A couple of other things in these agreements. NSP has agreed to release a 1976 easement that was granted to them within Falls Park. They no longer have any facilities along that easement, and so that would unencumber some more land within Falls Park that we could develop on. we found that as part of some of the title search going through Falls Park, trying to clean up those easements. And then the other piece is an easement that's unrelated to the Parks Department and the Park Board, but NSP is putting it as part of this agreement so that they get it done. They have been working with the Public Works Department to get an easement granted for the city property that we have near Veterans Parkway. They have some existing overhead power lines that run through the city property. When they sold, NSP sold that property to the state, and then the state granted it to the city. They forgot to reserve an easement when they did that. So it's cleaning up that piece. It was all part of the Veterans Parkway, the last phase of construction. We are still working on terms of that easement and getting the exact location down so that it matches up with their existing lines. There is a declaration in this agreement right now, just basically saying the same thing, that we don't have that all worked out, but it doesn't become under the purview of the park board, and it's not a park issue. It's just working that out with Public Works. As far as a schedule going forward, of course today we're looking for a recommendation of approval to the City Council for these two purchase agreements. If we get that, and if we get the easement language put together for the Veterans Parkway easement that they need, we look to hit the April 2nd City Council meeting for first reading. Then it'll go April 9th for second reading and for action. We'll wait the 20-day waiting period, and then we'd look to close around the first part of May. With that, can answer any questions you might have.
Tori, you want to remind us on the purchase price?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I forgot to mention that. $27,000 is what they're looking for. I guess just to kind of break it down, the Falls substation was originally going to be a donation. We're working through that. We found the Morel substation. We talked to some folks in Minneapolis that said, hey, we're a publicly traded utility, so we need to get compensation for the land. And so then we looked at the fair market value of the Morel substation based on its zoning right now, and that's how we came up with the $27,000. It falls in about the middle of the range of what we've been paying for Greenway property.
Okay.
The easement for the poles and the lines, that's for poles and lines that are already existing anyway, right? There's no
Correct.
additional ones.
Yeah, yeah. All the stuff that we're given easements for are existing. They're the ones that are the only thing left that they have in the park. So we tried to clean that up. It basically defines their area a lot better. They were on a sort of blanket easement type situation before. So this really cuts it down and cleans it up.
This would be, well, either you or Kelby, is there some cleanup that's required of these sites to make it?
Yes, so the Falls substation, if you go by there today, what you see is what's left over is a fence, basically, and then a number of foundations that they had for their steel erection. We've already talked with Public Works, and Public Works has agreed to knock down some of the foundations. We're not going to take them all the way to bedrock, but we'd knock the top off them, and then we would take out some of the gravel. There was gravel on probably 3/4 of the site. We'd take the gravel out and then put some topsoil back in for the time being. Clean it up, make it a nice green space for the time being until we figure out, update the master plan for Falls Park.
All right. Any other questions? If not, is there a motion to recommend approval of the, or do we want to do these as separate agreements?
I would.
Yes, okay. So first of all, then, we need a motion to recommend approval of the NSP purchase agreement for the Falls Park substation.
Recommend approval for the NSP purchase agreement for Falls Park substation.
Second?
All right. Roll call vote on that particular item then.
Lindquist,
Yes.
Stavanger,
Yes.
Noctigal,
Yes.
Steinborn,
Yes.
Bigeman.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. And then a motion to recommend approval of the NSP purchase agreement for the Morel substation.
Recommend approval for the NSP purchase agreement for the Morel substation.
Second.
All right. And a roll call vote on that item.
Lindquist,
Yes.
Stavanger,
Yes.
Noctigal,
Yes.
Steinborn,
Yes.
Bigeman.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. On to the report of the director. Don, you got anything to tell us?
Yeah, nothing's been going on at all. It's been boring. No, it's been a very active last couple weeks, needless to say, with the flooding and the additional flooding that we're expecting coming through Sioux Falls with the rapid snow melt and just high water levels, including all the existing ice chunks that are throughout our entire greenway system. It's going to be interesting next several days as we work through that. Obviously, I sent you a note a day or so ago about the closure of Falls Park, just to try to be very safe with the patrons that go in there. Invariably, there are some folks that like to take some risks, and with the water levels being that high, we just felt more comfortable, and the right thing to do is to close it down until the water levels go back down. And so our police department is citing people when they go into the park. We have signed it, we've barricaded it. Whether you're coming in on a trail or on one of the park roads, it means closed, and that means you can't walk in, you can't bike in, you can't drive in, and you will be cited if the police department finds you there. So, and that applies to all the other parks that are currently closed. So we did close that, and so far I think that's gone fairly well, but we still have people trying to wander through, so the police department's monitoring that. Also, wanted to let you know that we have activated the Emergency Operations Center. That's been in operation for several days now, preparing for the flood waters are coming down. Probably this weekend we'll probably hit. And so Kelby's a very active player in that and serves on that Emergency Operations Center team. Obviously everybody from the mayor on down to the frontline staff are working on that, whether it be sandbags, putting up signs and barricades, securing lift stations and pump stations throughout the city to secure water and sewer resources. Just a lot going on. We're likely going to pull the trigger on the closure of the entire bike trail. We're anticipating that the Army Corps of Engineers will be out during the high flows, monitoring the condition of the levees to make sure that we don't have any situations out there. They just obviously are skilled in doing that, and so our teams will be out there. And so in order for them to be able to have safe travel, 24 hours a day throughout the night, we will be recommending that we shut that down. So you'll probably hear about that tomorrow and release that to the community at that time. And then I think at this time I'd just like to have Kelby come up and talk about some of the damage. We're pretty used to it flooding, but we usually don't have the ice flows that come down as with it, which created some significant damage. And so just ask Kelby to give you a briefing on that.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Well, so like Don mentioned, the flooding this time that we saw last week on 14th of March, really there were two things within that causes issues. One, of course, is the flood water, which, as Don mentioned, we see typically every spring or every year we deal with flood waters. What seemed to cause the most damage for us this time was that the river was frozen and Skunk Creek was frozen when all of this occurred. So as those high floods came, or high waters came, it broke up all of the ice that was currently in place and floated it downstream. And as I'm sure you're well aware, took out the bike trail bridge at Dunham Park, took out one of the pedestals, or one of the support beams for one of the shelters at Legacy. So it was that ice that really caused most of the damage. Part of what else happened to us though too is that we saw higher water marks than we've seen. Well, in the 17 years I've been here, I've never seen the Tut Hill warming house get wet, and we had 3.5 feet of water in that warming house. So just kind of in general, think about all of the electrical components from Legacy Park all the way through Falls Park that got wet, that were submerged. Light pole bases, even light pole bases at Falls Park, the electricity at the Greenway. The Cherry Rock Park restroom was about 2 feet from roof line. The water line was there, so that electrical panel was completely submerged. The pump stations that we have for irrigation at Yankton Trail and Tomar were both submerged, and those electrical panels got wet as well. Also within the restrooms at Spencer and Yankton Trail, we believe that those electrical boxes were wet as well. So up and down the park system, those are common themes. We've had trees that were snapped off by the floating ice, and I think you've seen some pictures of that ice deposited at Farm Field. That's pretty an impressive sight. I was able to get to Tomar Park today, and that is just as impressive of a sight as the amount of ice that's collected there in the park. We also, at Riverdale Park, we had one of the swing sets that was there was literally lifted right out of the ground, moved about 20 yards toward the river, and then set back down. It's actually still upright, but it's out of the ground. So there's damage that we've never seen before. We did have some equipment and supplies that got wet in various places at Riverdale and at Sertoma Park. So once those floodwaters went down and we were advised that we were likely to see another event that's going to bring water to likely the exact same levels, that's when we kicked in our flood response plan, because now we've got time to prepare for it, and started moving what we call kind of the floatable items that aren't already damaged out of the parks. Picnic tables, trash cans. Soccer goals are actually still frozen in place, so they're going to stay where they're at. So doing some of those things. It didn't make any sense to have an electrician come in and remove electrical panels because they're already wet. But we did then go through all of those restrooms that were flooded and make sure that the sanitary sewer lines were blocked and were plugged so that no more flood water would enter the sanitary sewer system. We're of course not worried about a backup, we're just worried about making matters worse for sanitary sewer. We do have some asphalt damage at Pasley at the parking lot. Of course, a lot of the park system that was flooded we haven't been able to get to yet. There's still about 4 feet of water across the entrance at Spencer. So some of these things we still yet to need to assess, as far as we definitely had 2 different channels that were going through Yankton Trail Park last week. So what kind of damage that caused, we just don't know yet. But that will be an assessment that we make next week or the week after these floodwaters go down. And I do want to tell you that the entire team of Parks and Recreation have been in on this. The Tut Hill warming house that got wet, Sky's team was instrumental in getting some items out of there and contacting some of our vendors for the vending machines. Of course, we've been working with Public Works, started with snow removal, went straight to a flood fight. Now we're back on sandbag lines. So we're up and down the line, we're actively at it and doing everything we can. I mentioned to Don earlier today that today we made, if you see those A-frame barricades, we made 115 of those today. And that was just kind of an all hands on deck kind of thing, even brought in the forestry crew to help us get those things done. So that's kind of where we're at. We're kind of at a wait and see. Again, the ice was one of the biggest things. We did lose some of the top cap on the Greenway. Some of the granite top caps were knocked off by the ice, even at Falls Park, that lower viewing platform. That happened there as well. So definitely something we haven't seen before, but definitely something that I'm convinced that we can recover from.
Historically, what's the flood damage done to some of the parts of the bike path that frequently get hit?
Typically, the flood damage is sediment deposits, and that's about it. Maybe some split rail fence, but we've got split rail fence that's in toothpicks,
signs that are laid over because of the ice flow. But our typical flood response, I mean, it's a flash flood, comes up and goes down, deposits sediment, and that's about it. So this additional damage is, like I said, we've seen water higher than in a very long time. Actually, the flows set a record at Western Avenue coming under the Big Sioux River, and Skunk Creek come through there.
That was incredible footage. The city's done a really nice job, I think, of keeping the public informed. I'm curious, you know, like obviously all the spring sports are going on right now, and so all these soccer kids that you normally use, like Yankton Trail and Tomar, what kind of communication are we doing with those groups?
Yeah, we've been communicating with them, especially with soccer. We actually took Frank, the executive director with soccer, around today to just kind of show him what the fields look like. Also, one of the things that happened at Yankton Trail was a power pole that feeds the park was knocked over or was knocked down, and so that killed power to that park. And the word we're getting from XL is that it could be better than a month before power is restored, simply because they have to span across the river.
As far as the water coming through the city, a lot of it came down Skunk Creek, but do they do anything with the level of their airport as far as coming around instead of going over the falls?
Yeah, well, yeah. So everything that came through last week came down Skunk Creek. None of that came down the Big Sioux River and then through town. This event is going to be different. There's a whole lot of water coming down from the Big Sioux Basin that's going to come down, and at a certain point, we have to let water through the diversion dam and send it down the historic channel, simply to make sure that we don't compromise the integrity of the diversion dam. To kind of balance the pressure on both sides of it. So we are expecting, between what we are expecting coming through Skunk Creek and what's going to have to be released down the historical channel, to be about the same amount of water that we saw last week when it was just Skunk Creek.
Hats off to Kelby and the entire team for, you know, this is essentially all they've done. And they're going on 12-hour shifts as we speak to help with the flood fight. So, and also just kudos to the entire city departments, everybody that in the city is being affected and working on this, from the attorneys to HR to purchasing to police and fire, obviously, public works, emergency management. We've never seen the Emergency Operations Center in use. I don't know that I've seen more agencies, whether it be state, county, local, federal, involved in this process. And we've been through multiple activations of the EOC, but you can barely, it's standing room moment only when there's a report out on how things are going. And so we get together and talk twice a day, every day until this thing's over. And just a lot of coordination, a lot of volunteers through 211 are helping, and so just hats off to the entire city team.
They're getting a lot of calls through that 211.
Yeah.
People wanting help.
Yeah, I think the last number, over 500 calls come into 211. So, and they're helping to coordinate and get those folks to the sandbagging operations, you know, assisting with evacuations. The Red Cross is involved. You name the agency, and they're probably at the table. So. Lots of coordination. Regan Smith is our emergency manager and been through this a lot of times, so he's doing a great job coordinating everything.
Yeah. And also know that we've been in touch with our partners that could potentially be impacted this time, the golf courses, the zoo, of course, game fishing parks, and Audrey at the Butterfly House, and the Arboretum as well too. So we're making sure that everybody, and the CVB down at Falls Park, and since it's closed, but we're making sure that we contact everybody that we can think of.
Thanks for the report, and thanks for all your efforts.
And just to add on to that, Tori and Mike are working on bridge inspections. We've got 25 bridges throughout the park system, and so even though they might not be able to get to all of them and do a thorough inspection, we are going to do a cursory review so that we can make sure that they're safe to be on, realizing we'll come back once the water goes down and do a more thorough investigation, and so we're routing that through to get that started as well. Also wanted to share that the Arboretum Master Plan, we're currently in the process of working with pros to get that going, and had some preliminary meetings with the Arboretum Society on that. And so that process is moving forward. We're talking about taking some site visits to some other arboretums. Pros is working on a business plan and learning, doing some comparisons and benchmarking against other arboretums and how they function and work. And then ultimately we'll have a business plan that'll come out of that. And then obviously the big piece is we have, significant acreage out there that we want to have a master plan for and want to know what the future of that looks like. And so in time, we'll start bringing in the park board once the Arboretum Society's had a chance to weigh in, and Confluence and Pros consultants are working together to pull that together. And so excited about being able to have a really good strategy going forward for the Arboretum, so that as we plan out capital improvements and work with them on that project, we'll have something the park board can feel comfortable about. And so as we go about planning our capital program and operational sustainability for the Arboretum Society, that'll be really important and something that just really happy that we're able to do. And it's a bit of a challenge because it's a lot of people don't know what an arboretum is. If you don't live on the east side, you might not know where it is. And so there's a lot around marketing too that we're going to want to do, and just want to give you a heads up that that's still a work in progress. And Mike's leading that and coordinating that for us now, and just know that you'll start to see stuff here in the coming months about how progress we're making there. So, and then just EAB. If it wasn't snowing, it's flooding, and so we are in the process of removing those trees that we identified. Our contractors are in place to work on those as well. The challenge is we just not had weather to do it, and so our team has been stalled out on being able to do that. I was talking to Dwayne, our forester, this morning, and the grapple saw that we bought in order to help assist with those removals is working really good. They really like the piece of equipment, and they've already figured out some shortcuts on how they can streamline the process for removals. And so they're getting creative and learning the best way to take those trees down. And just as a reminder, these are biggest, stoutest ash trees we have in the entire city. And so so they're what, 4 or 5 inches bigger than we thought they were, Kelby? Yes. So anyway, it's not an hour job. They're going to be there a while to get these down, and so hats off to the forestry team too. And as soon as we get the water levels down, we'll be back at removals in that core area of the city. So, and that's my report for today.
Any questions for Don? Okay. We've had no additional items added to our agenda after the deadline. No reading of communications to the board, as none have been received. Open board discussion, any comments? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Meeting adjourned.